Hi, I'm Lynn, and welcome to my Get to Know the Romance Booktuber tag. So this has been a tag that's been out for a while. I saw Victoria Reads Romance, or Romance Reads, Crystal's Bookish Life, both do this tag about a year ago. I scrolled in the back to look and find their tags, but I'll have the original person tagged in the description as well. A lot of people have done this tag, but I'm excited to do my version of it. So, what is my romance origin story? So, I had graduated from undergraduate, and at my first job, I was doing some menial work as a lab scientist, and so I could have audio going in my ear, and I had never really read audiobooks before that point. And so I was trying to find popular audiobooks to read, and I was just picking up random YA books, primarily a couple of like self-help and development books as well. And so that kind of started me back on my reading train. I had really paused during college to evaluate and focus on my schooling. But around that time, I found Jen Toronto and Melanie Dickerson. They're both Christian writers. Melanie Dickerson is a YA historical romance writer that primarily does fairy tale retellings. And so I've read most of her backlist, and I've really enjoyed her books. And then Jen Toronto is an adult Christian romance, historical romance author, and she does primarily Gilded Age, I believe. So New York, and primarily in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So I really kind of got started into romance with that. I also, during the summer of the pandemic, I marathoned the Throne of Glass series, so that kind of helped me realize that you can have spicy scenes in books, and that really helped me realize that I had outgrown most of YA. And I also found The Hating Game. So Jen Toronto, Melanie Dickerson, The Hating Game, and Throne of Glass really are kind of the books that kind of made me realize that I had outgrown YA and YA fantasy primarily, and was really ready for adult stories. And my niche was in romance because, as many people know, the Divergent series ending destroyed me, and I realized that that is not what I'm interested in. That ending just was not good for me. The next question is, if you could be a heroine in a romance book, who would be the author, and what one trope you would have to have in it? So my trope would absolutely have to be fated mates. I love fated mates stories. I like that like instant attraction and understanding that we're going to be together, but the journey between that moment and where you're actually in love and where you're in a committed relationship that's past the initial spark is very intriguing to me. And I would like Juliet Cross or Lisa Kleypas to write that story. Juliet Cross is one of the best fated mate writers that I've read, and Lisa Kleypas is just a trusted author. I have loved every book that I've read from her, even though she hasn't read a ton of written any fated mates to my knowledge, because she writes primarily historicals. I just love her writing style and how the care that she gives to the characters and the story that they are a part of. Question is romances from this calendar year, so 2022, that I've read that more people need to read. These are books that I've discovered in 2022, not necessarily published in 2022. So the first is Run, Posey, Run by Kate C. Wells. I will say this book's not for everyone. I just watched Cheyenne from That Tall Book Girl read it for a reading vlog, and she didn't like it. But it's one of those books that I finished reading it in like Inception. I finished it and I was like, I need to reread this to see what I missed, because it's really like intellectual, and you're constantly evaluating our hero Dario's mindset and perspective throughout the entire book. So I found it really, really fascinating, and it just is really magical. And I think Kate C. Wells, I've read that and her Fated Rejected Mate series, and I found both of those to be just very compelling and very intellectual, and I wanted to just dissect what she had written and the character she had written. So highly recommend those books if you haven't discovered them yet, or you haven't been convinced to read it. I hope I have, because I've really enjoyed that. Next is Choosing Theo by Victoria Aveline. So this is a alien romance. Our heroine has been abducted by aliens, and she wakes up in this forest, and she realizes that she has to run, and she runs. And when she gets to civilization, they're appalled that she's been kidnapped unwillingly, and that her class of species has been left alone up until this point, and should have been left alone. But because she's here, she has to follow their customs, and so they enter partnership agreements. They call it marriages, where you pick a husband for 3 months as a test ride because of fertility issues on the planet. And so she gets forced into this situation, and she chooses Theo, who is the least attractive by this alien race's standards, but she finds him very attractive because his scarring looks very similar to tribal tattoos. I found it very compelling. It's a fated mate story, which I love, and there was just a lot of interesting aspects about how they navigated the communication, the cultural differences. That was handled very well, in my opinion. And the last is Savage Hearts by J.T. Geisinger. Everyone loves the Queens and Monsters series by J.T. Geisinger. In particular, Sloane's story and now Raina, both are very popular, with specifically Jen at the Book Refuge, but I really found my favorite to be Savage Hearts. Our heroine is kind of a homebody. She's a writer, just kind of living in her house, a little bit agoraphobic, not really like diagnosed, but her sister Sloane begs her to come visit, and she ends up getting kidnapped by an assassin who originally thinks she's a prostitute because she has this like bed-raggled appearance of sweats and gnarled hair, and the weird dynamics between Sloane and her and our heroine. And I just found it very fascinating. So those are 3 books from 2022 that I discovered that I have loved, and I will shout from the rooftops. Next question is my favorite romance subgenre. So it's paranormal. I love paranormal. I love fated mates. I love the lighter fantasy element. I don't always love high fantasy worlds, but I love low fantasy, paranormal world building, and the interesting interactions and politics and just everything that's going on around in the world. Some of my favorites are Juliet Cross and Cressley Cole for paranormal, but there's so many great ones that I've read. That was by far my favorite genre throughout my entire childhood, or my reading journey, I should say. I have some of my favorite YA books that I read were paranormal, so highly recommend that. Then something that I don't read a ton of, or not my favorite, are taboo books. I have a bit of a mental block where I'm just like, I don't want to pick them up. I was just watching Tiffany's from Tip Talk Pages Romance Takeover Readathon vlog, and she was talking about Priest and how it's a priest and regular person romance, and how taboo that is. And I mean, I grew up in the Catholic faith, and though I'm not necessarily practicing, how that the religion factors into the romance, or large age gaps and some of that stuff is hard for me to get past. I will probably never pick up student teacher because I am an educator, but that is something that I don't read a ton of, and I don't know if I ever will. My auto-buy authors are probably Juliet Cross, Ruby Dixon, J.T. Geisinger, and Kate C. Wells currently. Ruby Dixon is a fun, hot time, and a lot of people critique her plot, but I never find an issue with plot because she really focuses on how fated mates make life work, and that's really what I love to read about. Juliet Cross also, I trust her with paranormal. I'll see if I like her contemporaries. I don't read a ton of contemporaries, so that'll be an interesting one when I pick up Bright Like Wildfire. I love J.T. Geisinger and Kate C. Wells for their grittiness, and so those are some auto-buy authors for me. How do you find book recommendations? So I watch a lot of Booktube. I don't think many people who start a Booktube channel don't like watching other Booktubers. I have my favorites to watch, but my favorites for actual recommendations are JessenReadsRomance and Ava's romance books. I feel like Ava and I have the closest alignment on taste. We both like paranormal and alien romances, but we mix in some historicals and contemporaries. So I really trust her, especially for the alien and paranormal romance that sometimes my other Booktube followers don't read as frequently as I do. And then JessenReadsRomance is really the first Booktuber I found, and I find her personality to be amazing. So I just love her story and her ability with words. I love the little tidbits that she gets because she's Juliet Cross's niece, and I just love her personality, and I would love to meet her someday. So those are my two favorite places to get Booktube recommendations. What are some upcoming releases you're excited for? So I don't know when this video will be posted, but I feel like these books might already be out by the time this video comes out, so I apologize if they're been out. But in August, we have Pen Pal by J.T. Geisinger. I like a lot of other Booktubers are very intrigued with how J.T. Geisinger has marketed and communicated about this book, and I'm very interested to see how it turns out. I'm here for the ride. I don't know if I trust J.T. Geisinger with this story, but I'm going to read it. Next is Screaming Sins by R. O'Leary. This is book 6 or 7 in a paranormal series. This one is about not a siren. Anyway, I forget what she is, but she's a banshee. She's a banshee. So she can't speak because her voice being heard like causes death or intense pain or something. So she can't speak, and so she works at this diner and communicates through written messages and sign language. And she, I believe, has a relationship with the new town sheriff, who doesn't know that a large portion of this town is paranormal, supernatural. And so I believe that's the story being told. I'm very intrigued. Or is he a shifter? I don't know, but I'm very excited about this. It's been a couple months since I read a book in this world, and I'm just very excited to see how this story plays out. There's only been one book in this series that's been 4 stars for me, and so I really enjoyed it. The next question is, what misconception about romance do you want to put to rest? So I think in general, I have felt, especially with my family who aren't readers, I feel shame sometimes, and I feel like I have to hide what I'm reading, because if I tell my family what it's about, they're gonna give me a kind of a weird look. And so I just want to make sure that people feel like there are places that you can talk about whatever you're reading and whatever level you want to. I want to make sure that I continue to work to be empowered by what I'm reading, and that other people are empowered by what they're reading as well. And I don't care if it's a smutty good time or if it's this hard-hitting book that covers all this emotional depth. Whatever it is, I want everyone to be proud of what they are reading and feel comfortable talking about it. And that's one of the reasons why I started my channel, is I want to be more comfortable talking about what I'm reading, and that's why I'm here. So next is your newest finds in romance content. So I found Christy Reads a Lot from the How to Booktube video that Jess from Peace Love Books, I believe Bree from Love and Words, and a couple other booktubers, I think Tori from Novel Life, and the Love Librarian, what's her name? Caitlin from the Love Librarian. I posted in there that I was getting ready to start my content, but had kind of started a Bookstagram. It was very bare bones at that point, but it was live. And Christy was a dear and followed me on Instagram, and she's just a joy. Her videos are very well done. I hope to one day have the production at the level that she seems to have. And then also Steph Reads. She reads a lot of more popular and traditionally published work, but she does a really good job talking about them. It's not necessarily my reading taste, but someone will love her, and she needs all the love as well. Christy Reads a Lot, I believe, is still under 1,000 subscribers, and Steph Reads was around 300 last I checked, so check them out. The next and last question is, what are 3 beginner romances, in your opinion, for someone who hasn't picked up a romance before? So my strategy in this, or my strategy when recommending books, is always tell me what you're interested in. What TV shows do you like? What type of hobbies do you have? What type of things interest you? And try and go from there. But if I'm just saying something to know someone who doesn't know anything in general, I think the way to go is to get a contemporary that's pretty popular, standard, nothing too crazy. Something that's a paranormal that has a little bit of a darker edge and a little bit of more gritty tone. And then finally a historical that's kind of middle of the road. And for me, I think historicals work really well when it's a retelling. So temporary that I think is a good starting point is The Hating Game. I know it's been everywhere, but it was one of my corners of romance, and I found that the animosity and the workplace antics gelled really well. I feel like it was very entertaining. It's very reminiscent of popular rom-coms, but in a way that feels unique, and also just very entertaining. There's nothing cringeworthy. Sometimes rom-coms can feel very cringy, and I just felt very happy with how The Hating Game works as a starting point. Then for something that's paranormal with a little bit of a gritty undertone is the Immortals After Dark series. This series does best read chronologically, but there are several places that books are more complete standalones. I started at the beginning, and I think The Warlord Once Forever is a great starting point. It's on the shorter side compared to the rest of the Cressley Cole Immortals After Dark books, and there's a lot of dark themes, dark content that if you really like that, you might be interested in more dark romance. There's paranormal elements that are very interesting, that in the world building is very interesting. I can direct you to fantasy romance, and then there's also these heroes that are gone for the heroine, and so then you can see how fated mates and certain dynamics can come into play. And I just really find Cressley Cole masterful for paranormal books. And then the final book is The Duchess Tale by Tessa Dare. This is a loose Beauty and the Beast retelling. Basically, our heroine is a seamstress, and she makes this wedding dress for going to be a duchess, and she breaks off the engagement, and she still made the wedding dress, and so she wears it to this duke's house and complain and say, I want payment for this work that I've done. I can't not take payment. And so he offers her one better and say, do you want to be my wife? She's not doing it. Would you want to do it? All I need is an heir, and then you can go on your way, retire to the country, and do your own thing. So I find that to be very interesting as well. And so those are 3 places I recommend someone to start. So anyway, I hope you got to know me a little bit better in this Get to Know Me tag. As I said, I'll have everyone who's I've seen done it in the description. And thank y'all for watching. If you like, give it a thumbs up, and please subscribe to my content. And I'll see you in my next video.